ready for a deep dive into a topic that's everywhere these days, but still seems to trip people up.
I know what you mean. It's one of those things everyone's talking about, but there's so many different angles.
Exactly. So today we're going to unpack gender fluidity.
Sounds good.
And I think, this is about way more than just labels.
Oh, absolutely.
This is about challenging, the very foundation of how we think about gender.
Right, like all those assumptions we've grown up with.
Yes. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics.
Sure.
How would you define gender fluidity?
Okay, so at its core, it's about recognizing that someone's internal sense of their own gender,
Okay.
their own understanding of who they are, might not fit into those traditional categories of male or female.
Right, it doesn't have to be a perfect fit. Right.
Exactly. And that internal sense can change over time. And that's what we're talking about with fluidity.
So it's not about outward appearance, right?
No, not at all. Like how someone dresses or the pronouns they use at any given time, it goes much deeper than that.
Much deeper. Okay.
And you know where it gets really interesting is when we look at the science, because for so long,
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
we've been told gender is this simple binary. You're either male or female, and it's all based on biology. But new research is really challenging that.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. What does the science actually say?
Well, there was this study, I think it was in Nature magazine. It's called Sex Redefined.
Catchy.
It found that like 1 in 50 people have variations in their chromosomes, hormones, or anatomy
Wow.
that don't fit those typical male-female categories.
1 in 50? That's a lot more common than most people would assume.
Right. We're talking potentially millions of people.
Right.
So it's not this rare thing. It really challenges that strict binary idea.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how much we tend to oversimplify this,
Oh, totally. And it's not just about those physical traits. This research also shows hormones are playing a huge role even before birth. Then you've got brain development too. It's all this complex interaction of genes and hormones. It's complicated.
Right. It's not simple at all.
Not even close.
So how does someone being intersex play into this?
So that's a perfect example, actually.
Okay.
Because intersex people are born with sex characteristics, genitals, chromosomes, hormones.
Right.
And these characteristics don't fit neatly into male or female. So from the very start, they're challenging that strict binary.
They really force us to confront those categories we've created. It's like, are these categories even helpful?
Exactly.
And unfortunately, there are just so many myths and misconceptions when we talk about gender fluidity, which I think is why we're here.
Absolutely. I hear you.
So let's dive into some of those, because I know there are a lot.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common ones you encounter?
Oh, there are so many. I don't even know where to start.
Right, like where do we even begin?
Well, I think a big one, and maybe this is the most common, is people confusing gender identity with sexual orientation.
Yes. Thank you. I hear that all the time.
It's like they're getting it all mixed up.
Right. It's like people try to oversimplify it.
Exactly.
And it's just so much more nuanced than that.
It really is. And being gender fluid says absolutely nothing about who you're attracted to.
It's so important to remember that.
It is.
And another misconception that I hear a lot,
Yeah.
particularly I think about younger people, is this idea that it's just a phase.
Ugh.
Ugh.
Yes, like they'll grow out of it.
Right, exactly.
But again, that goes back to the science.
Right.
It's not just some whim, like their mind is made up.
So dismissive.
It is. And for most people, even if their gender expression shifts, their core sense of self is actually very stable over time.
It really is. It reminds me of this story. I can't remember where I read it.
Yeah.
I think it was the Trevor Project,
Okay.
where this young person described feeling like they were constantly switching masks,
Oh, wow.
trying to fit in, trying to meet everyone's expectations. Exactly. And they talked about how exhausting it was
I bet.
to never feel like they could truly be themselves.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah.
And, that kind of ties into Judith Butler's work.
Yes. Gender performativity.
Right, exactly. For those who maybe haven't encountered that term before, can you give us a little refresher?
Yeah, so basically Butler's saying that gender isn't something that we are inherently, it's something we do.
It's performative.
It's a performance, like through our actions, our behaviors, how we express ourselves.
Right, it's almost like we're all playing these roles of male and female that society has kind of prescribed to us.
It's like a script we've all been handed, even if it doesn't feel right.
Exactly. And it really limits us, I think.
It does.
Because it doesn't even come close to capturing the real diversity of human experience.
Not even close.
And this is where the concept of a gender spectrum comes in, right?
Exactly, yes. Because it's not this rigid binary. It's more like a spectrum with all these different possibilities, and male and female are just 2 points on that spectrum.
And there's so much space in between.
A whole universe in between.
So to be clear, can you break down the difference between gender identity and gender expression?
Sure. So gender identity, that's about who you know yourself to be deep down, like your internal sense of your own gender.
Got it.
And then gender expression, that's how you choose to present your gender to the outside world. So your clothes, your mannerisms, all of that.
So it's totally possible for someone to identify as male but express themselves in ways that we don't usually think of as masculine.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no one right way to express any gender, and that's really the point.
It's about breaking free from those boxes we always try to put people in.
That's it, exactly. And it's not about being politically correct or whatever. It's just acknowledging that people are complicated.
Exactly. We're all complex individuals.
Right, and this is about recognizing that.
You know, this has been such an amazing conversation.
It really has.
And I hope it's got our listeners thinking in new ways.
Me too.
But before we wrap up, I've got to ask, why does this even matter?
You mean like what's the takeaway for people listening?
Exactly, yeah. What's the so what?
That's the big question, right? I think it comes down to this. How do we make the world a place where everyone feels seen?
That's beautifully put.
Like a world where everyone feels respected and valued for who they are, you know?
Absolutely. We all want to feel like we belong.
Exactly. And when we question these rigid categories, it opens up so many possibilities.
Not just for individuals, but for everyone, right?
100%. It changes how we interact with each other, how we build relationships, everything.
Wow. It makes you think about how much we could accomplish if we embrace this idea.
Right. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
As we're all trying to navigate this whole gender thing, is there anything you hope our listeners will keep in mind?
I'd say stay curious. Stay open to learning new things, and don't be afraid to question what you think you know.
Because the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. And
Yeah.
if we can all approach these conversations with empathy and a genuine desire to understand,
Absolutely.
then we're already moving in the right direction.
100%. Yeah.
This deep dive has been so insightful. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, keep those minds open, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.